Welcome. My name is Drigax, otherwise known as Drigax, otherwise known as the Shift Key Producer, aka you already know. But tonight we're just gonna be working on some character modeling, or sorry, not character modeling, but we're gonna be finishing up the character rigging. This guy right here, I call him. His name is Tex, and he's just my test guy. Cool little low poly dude. Could be a bit more anatomically correct, but I think he gets the job done. As you can see, these little rectangles, what are they called? In Blender they're called B-bones, but whatever. They're rectangular prisms, and the shape of them is kind of like the outline of my character's skeleton. As you can see, there's bones here for the chest, there's bones for the hips, pelvis, legs, got a bunch of finger bones, and this is called rigging. And tonight we're going to be doing some more advanced rigging, namely setting up inverse kinematics. In a nutshell, there's millions of tutorials on YouTube that tell you how to do inverse kinematics. Personally, I really love the tutorial series by, what is his name? Let me check my history real quick. Born CG. Here's a quick shot of the video. Born CG. Great guy. Really talented. Way better than me. If you like his stuff, or if you're interested in really learning, check out his tutorials. He has a ton of them. And they'll teach you everything from simple modeling to rigging to lighting. And if not him, then definitely Blender Guru, but he's super mainstream. Give this guy some views. He's really good. Blender Guru, he's successful. I love him, but I love, like, showing off people who aren't as successful, like really hyping them up. Born CG, 50K views, it's still a lot, don't get me wrong, but yeah, let's get it. Alright, so tonight we're rigging up Tex. So right now we have the basic skeleton in place. If I switch into pose mode allows me to, well, pose. So let's say I move my cursor and I rotate his leg. As you can see, the leg actually rotates, and yeah, it's not perfect, but you get the idea. So it's skinned to this mesh already. A lot of his stuff is moving around properly. If I was going to grab like a shoulder piece, that all moves as you'd expect it to. Rotates reasonably well. Don't mind like the tearing in the mesh. That's just because it's mirrored. But when this guy gets exported, he should look pretty good. And so you can see we got some turning. Try to bring it down to this bone. His upper arm works well, and I just moved some of these bones around, so I might have to reskin this area. Some of these vertices don't quite move as you'd expect them to. So these right here, you want to check. I'll check the weight painting on them later on, but right now, let's focus on getting the inverse kinematics set up. So, easiest way to do it, on to feet. So we're gonna take this bone for the foot. I just extruded out this little intersection here. What we want to do is we want to remove its parent. Why? Why can't I edit this? For internal use only. What the heck? Don't do that to me. You know you're doing wrong. Okay. So we're gonna have to get creative. Love getting creative. So, how about instead we're going to take this guy and we're going to switch the parent to here. Object, and we're keeping our transform. And did that let me remove this guy's parent? Sweet. Who's this guy's parent? Uh-oh, that's not right. So this is my root. This is my shin bone. And I'm going to parent this to here and keep transform. And it does not work. Why does it not work? Everything is definitely what's it called? It's discrete. Everything in life is discrete. There's no such thing as magic. There's some reason why this isn't working, and we're gonna spend some time figuring it out. I'm going to shut off this stream. We'll be back in. Okay, so we have this bone here. We're going to remove its parent, and you gotta make sure you're in edit mode when you're, well, editing things. And for some reason, it's still connected to something. Why? Why are you connected here? So if I take you, oh, as you can see, even though I made this edit to the mesh here, on the other side, even though these are mirrored, certain things don't get changed automatically. So I'm gonna take, but if I move this, these guys sync. The position, rotation, all those other properties are definitely synced because they're mirrored. But things like parent transform, I guess that isn't synced. When even though you have the mirror modifier on your mesh, I guess it's just a Blender quirk. I'll be sure to try and keep that in mind. And that's just the reality of working in such a program. It's just that you have a lot of there's just a lot of things going on in this program. It's extremely powerful, but it's also not necessarily the most user-friendly of programs. And that's probably what keeps most people from really picking up Blender, is just that it tends to get in its own way quite easily. And that whenever you try to do something in it, it's so easy to have an idea, but you just feel so powerless in that you just don't have the tools to accomplish that idea. Like you know, it's like, I want to make, 3D guy, I want to make him run around, and the problem is that I have no clue how to make that happen. And it's just so frustrating and so easy to get like disillusioned. And for the aspiring Blender people out here, for the aspiring Blender artist, I guess, or even if you're just a game dev who just wants to learn how to make your own assets like me, the only advice I can give you is just to power through it, and eventually you're gonna build up that knowledge. You're gonna build up that catalog of little tips and tricks and how to use Blender to the point where you're doing really cool things like my great friend, what's his name? Kid Radical. I don't want to use his real name on the stream, of course, but yeah, Kid Radical, really good. He's on Instagram, Twitch, Tumblr, I think, and he has this really cool like neo retro PS1 low poly style that's all the rage nowadays. But dude does it, and he does it well. And when you see that, you're like, well, why can't I do that? And it starts somewhere. So right now I have this little bone down here. This is a control bone, and for now it's just here. We're going to be using this to control the entire leg and foot, so that when I start animating things, all I have to do is move this thing around. So the most important thing to learn about is inverse kinematics. You do that by adding a modifier to your bone. So if I add a constraint, this is a spline IK? No. Some sort of inverse kinematic. There we go. Inverse kinematics can only be added to bones. This is not a bone. The fuck? Sorry. Okay. So let's figure out, how do we add a constraint to our bones? bendy bones. That's not what I want. So easy way to do it is, can I just say add constraint? Yes. Oops. This is the best addition to Blender, is this little search bar, because there's so much crap. So much crap. Can only be added to bones. So I believe that I want this, and I'm using this as my target. No, I'm adding, so you click on your target first, and then the last thing you click is your active object. And so, since this is the active object and I have a target clicked, now I should be able to add my inverse kinematic constraint. No, IK constraint can only be added to bones. Well, this is strange. I'm in edit mode. Oh, maybe I need to be in pose mode. Let's try setting up my constraints in pose mode. Still does not work. Wow, this is gonna be a long night, guys. I think this is a bug. So just looking at this Blender artist thread, it's saying that you should only be able to use it in pose mode, but I am in pose mode. It's trying to set the constraints. Okay, oh, bone constraint right here. Okay, so in pose mode you get this cool little bone constraints tab, and honestly, in my personal opinion, that's bad UI to hide things depending on whatever superficial mode you're in, because every mode should, I mean, it's like there's certain things that should work regardless of what mode you're in, and that seems like a constraint made by the people who wrote this program, as this is a reasonably mature software project that's been in the works for over a decade. And so there's really old things in this implementation that, you know, it's just easier to work around than to properly fix. And so let's go back to pose mode. We're going to, so as you can see, if I change what mode I'm in, like if I'm in edit mode, that goes away. So I gotta be in pose mode, and I get this option. So I'm gonna add this bone constraint here, and inverse kinematics. There we go, nice and yellow, perfect. And while we're at it, let's just add another one here. Should I add another one here? Should I just delete this whole thing and just reskin it? I should probably just start from scratch and reskin it all. So I'm going to Control Shift S. Let's figure out how to turn on the capture. Blender enable key capture. Yeah. Screencast keys. Here's an add-on. It's no longer distributed, but you can just download it and install it. Awesome. And let's download it. So Blender's great because it's very easily extensible, and so you can just, you know, find an add-on and use the add-on. Easy as pie. So let's grab the latest version. Add-ons are distributed as Python files, which is cool because, you know, you can read through this code and figure out what it's doing. Right now, I don't think anybody wants to learn how to program how to write Python because this is a Blender tutorial. But I don't know. Eventually, I might be streaming myself coding. I don't know if there's much to get out of watching somebody code in real time, but I don't know. So let's save this link as, and we're going to save to our special scripts folder for Blender add-ons, and I'll just save it in here. And so file, user preferences, there's a way to import an add-on under add-ons. happens if this actually, there we go. Add-on, install add-on from file, go up, scripts, Blender add-ons, and we're installing screencast tool keys. Alright, refresh, enable, sweet. Hopefully this actually saves. And so now I'm just gonna version this file. We're gonna call it dynamic rig, or IK rig. So nothing wrong with the old little polymail, but let's make this distinction just to say that, okay, this one's actually going to be rigged properly, and this will probably be the master version going forward. So let's see, how do I turn on the screencast keys? Oh, here it is. Start display. Yeah, this is awesome. Alright, cool. So let's Control Shift Z, and we're going to redo that. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to select all of this. Actually, let's go into edit mode, and we're going to, I like using circle select all our bones on the right side of our character, and we are just going to delete all of them. So let's just make sure they're all selected. Looks like it. And delete bones. Ah, damn, mirror modifier. Alright, so let's go to our armature. We definitely have a modifier active on this guy, right? Yeah, here's our modifier, mirror modifier. So where is the, here it goes. So we have a mirror modifier on our mesh here. We do not have a modifier on the armature, which is a little strange because how did we do it beforehand? I'm guessing that I'm doing something where my operations are getting like copied over. Let's see. Mirror. Oh my. Well, as I was saying before, these are all just quirks, man. Blender is full of quirks, and you either gotta be willing to learn the quirks, or you just buy Maya or 3ds Max, or you know, another one of those multi-$1,000 software products that give you, you know, maybe about 25% better tooling, but you're gonna run into your own set of quirks with Maya and 3ds. My personal experience gets extremely unstable because it's just a giant archaic code base like Blender. Never used 3ds Max, but they're both great tools, and there's like, you know, a lot of professional people who use these tools and they use them amazingly. But personally, in my current stage of how good I am in doing this, and the fact that I'm not doing this professionally, or at least I'm not doing this as my sole source of income, I can't quite justify the purchase, you know. So instead, we're just going to learn how to use Blender to the best of our ability, and if we ever find that Blender just doesn't give us what we need, then it's time to start looking into more paid tooling. But so far I haven't ran into anything that I can't do in Blender. Just a lot of things I don't know how to do in Blender. That's the major distinction. Also, if you ever want to sound like a hacker, just get like a mechanical keyboard. It works quite nicely. So, we're going to set up our inverse kinematics constraint. Our target is going to be this guy. So we're gonna give this a nice name. It's gonna be leg ik.l. And so this will be our RK target for our left leg. This guy over here, controller.l. And then for these guys, I believe I should just be able to say names, flip names. Nope. So instead, I'm just gonna copy this over. .r. Uh-oh. And this would be leg ik.r. Alright, cool. So now we have our controller bones properly named. We're gonna set our target to, oh boy, armature, and the bone is going to be leg ik.l. So now that that IK controller is set, we are actually controlling our whole body with the one IK controller bone. What the fuck the heck is going on, guys? Well, that is actually a very simple solution. What we're saying is that with the IK chain length, that tells you about how many bones in your chain, how many bones up the chain is this IK target going to be able to affect. So let's set it to 1, 2. So we only control these 2 bones here. So we're going to control our shin here with 1. So if I set it to 1, and I start moving around my IK bone, as you can see, it only affects the shin. So now let's up that to the recommended dosage of 2. And booyaka. Alright, we're getting somewhere, guys. And just for a bonus, let's get a pole target as well. So we're going to take an IK, we're going to take this bone here, we're just going to duplicate it. Oop. What the heck? Where is my bone at? So this is leg ik.l. I thought I duplicated it. Looks like I didn't. Maybe it's Control D. And Control D didn't do that. So Shift D. Shift D didn't do it. So when your keyboard shortcuts don't work, you just type it in. And the reason why it doesn't work is because we're in pose mode. We need to be editing in edit mode. Gotta love those Blender quirks, man. So we're gonna take these guys, move them here, and let's center them in front of the knee, and let's bring them out a bit. Perfect. And what we're gonna do, let's make them a bit larger. Oh, cursor to selected. Let's scale this guy. Oh, we can't scale them in Z. I guess not. So instead, I think they'll work as they are. They kind of point in the direction that we expect them to work, right? So let's grow back to pose mode, and we're going to use armature bone. Okay. So we're just gonna rename this guy to knee pole. Maybe we'll go with IK underscore knee pull. I don't like underscores. IK knee pull.l. That'll do. And we'll eventually rename everything else to follow that IK bloody blah convention too. Alright, cool. So now that we set the pole here, as you can see, the knee wants to point in the same direction that the pole is pointing, if that makes sense. So let's say we want to rotate this guy. That is going to make my knee want to rotate. And then if I move it, oh sorry. So if you can see this X here, I actually misspoke. So the pole tells the knee which direction it should be facing. So it's using that x-axis as the guide. So it's saying align the x-axis such that it is pointing directly to the location of my pole. So as I move this around, it'll allow me to get a greater degree of motion. So this control bone gives me position. All it does is give me position. However, this bone gives me orientation. And so it's a significant, so with these two things, you can control a chain of bones in 3 dimensions within reason. You know, if you have like, you know, a chain of like 3 bones and you only have like, you know, 2 control points, then you're going to have some degree of freedom that's not properly constrained. But now let's set this up. Also, this is kind of the way that I stand in real life, which is kind of funny. I'm like frog-footed. But so let's change this up. I think this is revealing some major problems in our armature. And so we're going to take the whole armature and we are going to bone. There's some way to recalculate. No, I can't quite remember how to do it. It was like blender bone set orientation, maybe. Recalculate bone orientation. Recalculate roll. And so we can't do that in pose mode. So instead, let's do this in edit mode. And so recalculate roll. And we're going to use the global plus Z axis so that now all of our bones are going to be oriented in such a way that the master bone is pointing in plus Z. You can see that this is going to cause a problem with our mirroring, but for now, I believe that that should fix our pole issue. Yes. So now that this bone is properly oriented, now that X is pointing forward, just given the way that we have this bone set up, we should be able to now take this guy, put him directly in front of the knee. Also, if you're modeling in like perspective mode, you're doing it wrong. Don't model in perspective mode. You have no reason to be. Crap, this is pose mode, isn't it? I'm sure there's gonna be, if somebody who actually is like good at Blender is like, well, I'm all in perspective mode. You know, you can't just be generalizing. Yeah, it's like, yeah, everybody has their own workflow, but for the person who's learning Blender, it's not a great way to do it. It just doesn't help you really. You need to know, you need to get a good grasp of how large your objects are and not get skewed by the perspective. So I don't know, just always use orthographic mode, because when you're looking at stuff with like actual perspective, now it's harder to be accurate in what you're doing, you know, because now even though these things are literally like, you know, aligned with each other in 3D space, the perspective of the camera doesn't allow them to line up. So orthographic mode allows you to be precise, allows you to do things with accuracy. Don't use perspective mode until you're like actually rendering. Just don't. Alright, so where were we? So what we're going to do is we're going to take all of our bones. We use Alt-G to reset their positions, Alt-R to reset their orientation. And so now you can see that this bone right here is a little turned. I'm not quite sure why. I believe this has something to do with, oops. Has something to do with the way, it has to do exactly with how the bones are set up here. So what we're going to do is, can we recalculate the roll again? And let's use the logo plus Z tangent. Ah, that's what I wanted. That is exactly what I wanted. Honestly, at this point, I'm not even sure what I want. So my ideal was making sure that all the bones are facing plus Z. Their roll is recalculated such that each of them are facing plus Z in the negative Y direction, being forward, if that makes sense. So let's try this one more time. Let's try the global minus Y axis. And so maybe that'll give me what I want. So now up is facing minus Y. Let's see how that helps us when we start posing. So as you can see, now the pole here wants to face towards negative X. Sorry, it wants X to face the pole. Sorry, so the positive X is facing the location of your pole. I'm quite sure that changing the rotation or changing the rotation of the pole does very little. If I set the cursor to actually rotate about the actual center of the bone, the actual head of the bone, you can see that the pole doesn't seem to care. And the same for if I try to rotate it from the top. Nilch, nothing happens, which is what I'd expect to happen. Alright, so the problem being is that I need my bones to be properly oriented so that I guess if there's a way to either A, change the pole calculations, or actually let's not even use the pole here. Let's not use the inverse kinematics pole for this, because it seems that it's giving us some artificial constraint such that we're using the X of this to point towards our pole, and I don't want that behavior. So let's just remove that behavior from here, and we're just going to use this inverse kinematic constraint to fix the location of our bones. So making sure that at the end of this chain of bones, we are pointing at this handle here. So we're going to instead add another IK constraint here, chain length of 1, to just control this upper thigh bone here. And we're gonna set this target to be our knee pole, if that makes sense, guys. So IK knee pole.L. And so now this should also give us knee control here. I don't believe it gives us this fine grain control, but it does allow us to change where our knee is pointing. And honestly, that's all the control you really need. So it does, so like it makes the thigh want to point to this pole here, while the shin is trying to point to the controller down here. And using these two control points, we're able to control the orientation, and we're able to control where this arm is and what plane this arm exists on. If that makes sense. So we're saying that there's such a plane in this whole three-dimensional space that these lines are going to exist on, and that is what this control point allows us to enforce by making this first point want to go there. Now the second point gives us the other point along this plane, or I guess a line, but whatever. But you kind of get what I mean. So now that we can do that, we're going to Alt G, Alt R, everything is back to our edit position. So now that we have control over this leg here, let's set up the foot. And so the foot, this is a little trick that I picked up from watching a CG Guys video. So we're going to reverse. We gotta do this in edit mode. So we're gonna take this bone, flip. I don't want revert to, but I want to reverse. Reverse orientation bone blender. So let's try armature. Bone settings? Nope. Armature. We don't want symmetrize. Separate bones. Bone roll, no. Oh, by the way, yeah, a lot of the settings are actually in the menus, but you know, this is a program written by programmers. This is a UI designed for programmers, you know. So everything's hidden in menus and sub-menus and drawers that appear and disappear as you need them. And you guys just know the workflow to be good at it. So I'm going to select bones, specials, switch direction. Yeah, that's exactly what we want. It'll be more apparent later, but yeah, we do want to switch direction. And now that we switch direction, we no longer have any sort of like we no longer parent any of this. So like this has doesn't have any like relation, while these are still parented. It totally broke like the relation of all these bones. So a little hack here is we're going to take this bone and this bone, and we're going to control P and keep the offset. So now, uh-oh, wrong way. So we want this and that, and parent it and keep the offset. So now, yeah. So we go into pose mode. If I move this guy, it takes the child with it. Perfect. And just side views to show you. Okay. So back to it. We're going to take this guy and this guy. Ooh, gotta go back to edit mode. This guy and this guy. And parent. And keep transform. So now, this guy should be the parent of both of these components, but instead, hope I didn't make it so this guy is the parent of both of these components. So foot L. Ay, ay, ay. I guess you get faster at it when you're not terrible. So I just want, alright, so here's a nice workaround. Knowing the menus. Relations, parent, back to edit mode. The parent is going to be foot.l. Where is foot.l? Alright. So now we go back to pose mode, and that's more like it. So, notice how we have this cool little change in behavior. So now, when I can move this one singular foot bone, this foot bone controls my entire leg. And that's the idea, is that the less points you need to move in keyframe, the quicker you can animate. And if you have to animate every single bone in this rig for however many things you're trying to do, it's going to be a long, arduous, painful workflow. And so we got to figure out how can we do this as easy as possible. And so this rig setup allows us to do something like that, and also gives us the ability to do something really cool, like we can even like shift S cursor to select it. We can rotate this rig here too, and that gives us kind of like a tippy toe effect. And with just one little tweak to this bone down here, we're no longer going to have this inherit the rotation of the parent. So now if we rotate this bone here, we can get on our tippy toes. We can move this bone up. Oop. Or something like that. So there's one last step that I'm missing, and that's where this foot controller bone comes into play. Allow me to consult the masters on YouTube as to the best way to do so.
Hello and welcome to part 31 of my video series on how to use Blender 2.6. Length. And so that looks pretty good to me. I'm going to press W and subdivide that. Hello and welcome. Why? Because you want to go straight back. And then there's going to be a small bump, so it's going to go up a little bit. And we can solve that by going to the Bone tab with that bone selected and unchecking under Relations. We can uncheck Inherit Rotation. And that'll make it not rotate when we rotate its parent. So I'll go ahead and select all the bones, press Alt-R to clear it out, and do it again. So now he's having on his toe or on the ball of his foot.
Alright, so let's go back to the armature display mode. I guess the bone display mode. There's some mode that allows me to change how these bones are displayed.
One more bone in the foot, just one
So I really like the octahedrals. They're really nice for controlling things precisely. These are great for displaying like the scale of the bones in relation to each other, and that bigger bones show up as, you know, like volume wise, and it allows you to, you know, just properly see like, oh, okay, my finger bones are actually this large. And you can kind of see why, you know, the overlap between bones going to cause some issues when we're skinning, but yeah, it's not a huge concern. It'll all work in the end.
This foot isn't modeled very well. To be honest, it's not flat on the ground. So we're just going to imagine that it's going to be right about there. And then I'll go to the bottom. I'll deflip the foot. There we go. And now in pose mode, I can grab this new foot controller bone, and I can grab it, and it should control the entire foot. I should be able to rotate it, and it will rotate at the heel. Okay? And I can rotate the actual foot.
And so now I believe that the final missing piece to this whole situation is we want to take our foot bone and we want to parent it to our foot controller bone. So if we make parent to the object, if I check this bone, it should now have a new parent, or the other way around. Let's fix that. We gotta do this in edit mode anyways. And we keep the offset. So now we move this bone around back in pose mode. Oh. It does absolutely nothing. Amazing, right? Because we got the parenting in reverse. So you check the object that you want, you check the parent, then you click the object that you want to parent, then you click make parent, and we're keeping the offset between them. So now if I click this guy, I still do nothing because I think I got it in reverse again. Let's try it one more time. So maybe you click the parent and then the object you want to parent, and then you keep offset, and that does nothing again. Who gets parented this time? Okay, so let's try the object you want to parent, then you click the parent, keep offset, and so now this guy is parented to the foot controller. So you click the object and you click the parent last. Click the parent last. Parent last. Okay. So now we have this cute little foot controller. And the cool thing about this is that when we get into, if we want to do like uneven terrain or something, this would be a really cool, you can set an IK target to this guy too. When you're on the ground, where this guy wants to, you know, he wants to be, if we set the cursor to the selected here, it'll rotate to match whatever we're trying to do. Okay, you guys see some serious issues with this. Yes, I see some serious issues as well. And the problem is that this bone, it's not quite, the feet aren't quite behaving the way that you'd expect them to. So it looks like the problem is that the toes look like they should follow the foot controller as well. Like you'd expect the toes, or maybe not. Maybe it is working as expected and my mesh just isn't skinned properly. It's like, you know, we want this guy to be able to, you know, push off against the ground. Just like, when he runs, And so we can...
center back in the middle of our world, so we can flip over that point very easily, or pivot over that point very easily. And then we'll duplicate all these left leg bones, so shift D, and then right click.
Alright, so one really cool thing that we should probably do is just move this bone, just change these feet bone a little bit.
We'll do that again. We duplicate them. So right click to come back in the exact same spot. And then we press S, X, negative 1. Enter. And
And so, let's go back to, oh, we are in edit mode, great. So in edit mode, let's grab this joint here. No, I just want the joint. So how do I change the display back to octahedral? Click our way through each of these tabs till we find the one that'll let us do what we need to do. Here we go, octahedral. There we go, much better. Let's get into this nice little view here, and oh, this is great. So let's make the foot bone here, make the foot bone go all the way down to here. The ankle is about right for the ankle. It's a little high, admittedly, but it should do most of what we need to do. And this should give us that fine grain like toe control. This should really control like the rest of the toe. Let's extend it all the way down to here. And just so we're like a little consistent with our controller, we're gonna set the foot controller to be all the way down here. And we want it to have the same X and the same Z, but different Y, just so it's perfectly straight. So the X's are the same. The Z's are mostly the same, actually. Alright, that'll do. Let's have this thing go all the way to our character's heel. Alright, so looks good. One thing that might be a cause for concern is that we're in ortho view, but these guys don't line up anymore. There we go. Back to pose mode, and boom. Now we're cooking. Look at that. Ooh wee. Ooh wee. And so we'll be doing some reskinning just to make this look good later. Alright, cool. So the legs are nicely rigged. You can do a lot with such a rig. You can karate kick people, you know, you do the falcon knee. You can make a run cycle just using this, or you know, just use the bottom half of a run cycle, obviously, but you know what I'm getting at. So a lot of this stuff is working. So now let's rig the arms. And so for a lot of the arms, same rules apply. We're just going to grab a little, gonna follow the same process here. Make sure we're in edit mode, extrude, and let's set it to the normal. Extrude, which way is Y? Y is that way. Let's make it extrude back. So kind of like, just to keep it consistent with the way we rig the legs, where it's pointing in the negative, the positive Y direction, let's just do the same thing here. And so this will be our arm controller. And so now we have this IK controller for our arm. I'm going to duplicate this guy with Shift D and make this also one. And if you do Control 1, you move around to the character's back. And we're just going to set this guy to be set up to his GY allows you to move something just along the Y plane. And we're going to set this elbow pole to be just a little ways back from the elbow. Cool. Alright, so now let us go to here. We're going to clear out the parenting. Do not need any parents for this. Nor do we need parents for this. Great. These are now orphan bones. And let's make sure that the naming convention for all our bones makes sense. This is foot controller. Great. This is toe.l, foot.l, shin.l, leg ik.l. Over here we have, this should be arm ik .l. And then this is ik elbow pole .l. Wait, yeah, ik elbow pole, and this is ik arm.l. So now we can add another ik constraint, and let's go back to pose mode, and we're going to add a constraint. And another what? Alright, so we're just gonna add it through here because this seems to work. Great. Target armature bone ik arm.l. Great. So now if we move this guy, wrong thing. Great. The whole let's look at it from the front. Oh man, this dude is broke. Look at that. Or we could say he's a broke boy. Alright. So let's add another ik constraint here. Our target is still the armature, but this time we're using the elbow pole.l. Sweet. Let us change the chain length to 1. A chain length of 0 is essentially unlimited. This needs a chain length of 2. And now, from these two things fighting each other, we should now be able to properly control our arm. Yeah. Fick it, yeah. Fick it, fick it, fick it up, 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 fick it, yeah. All right, and that is how you rig a character, dude. That's the rough part of it. You pretty much like you can take this rig and you can do a lot with it now. The rest of this stuff is, it's optional. This is the basics for having a movable character and be able to do some really, really simple animations. You're not going to have like super really good stuff. You want to know why? Because he can't control his butt. That's why. We're going to have to rig that up as well. Let's do it. Alright, cool thing is we can do stuff like this. So if we grab his center and move it around, once all the IK constraints are properly set up, his whole form will be working. Right now we're just doing the left half because I'm going to take it all and just copy it over to the right side again. In the meantime, let's solve the problems that we can solve quickly. Camera, you're cool, but I'm not rendering right now, so I'm gonna just turn you off. There we go. Floor, you can stay for now, but if you piss me off, you're going to. So last thing to do is I'm going to consult with the master real quick. Oh, right. Let's have some fun. So we still have our hand too. And so there's a really easy way to rig up your hands such that they're easy to control as well. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this bone here, add a constraint, copy rotation. It's going to copy rotation of armature, and it wants the index proximal phalanx.L. If you know your anatomy, these are the bones of the hand. I find that a lot of things are easier to conceptualize and keep track of if you just try to stick, like, you don't have to stick strictly to the naming convention, to the medical naming convention, but it's easy to do things because there's a lot of people who just make up their own conventions, and then if you look at their rig, it's going to be hard to figure out what they're talking about. But this works because it's just, it's universal. You can complain about your distal phalanx to a doctor and they'll know exactly what bone to look at, and it's a shame that a lot of people don't want to use this notation because it's not straightforward, and as game developers, a lot of people just want to do things as easy as possible, but you know how it is. But it's what it is. So this is the middle finger, so we're using the middle proximal phalanx. This is the ring finger. I think there was a different name for it. So I'm going to set another copy rotation, and this is going to use the armature, and it'll be using the ring proximal phalanx.L. Ring proximal phalanx.L. And this guy will be copying the rotation of the small proximal phalanx.L. So now, if I rotate this dude, I'm going to just move the cursor over here, and I'm going to rotate along the normal. It doesn't seem to be copying the rotation, guys. What's going on? Oh, because it needs to go from local space to their local space. So it copies my finger's local rotation and applies it to its own local rotation. Obviously, come on. So now you can see that we're getting that nice little closing action here, which is great. This is how we grasp things with our hand. So we just need to copy the process with these. Copy the process onto this thumb here. Add constraint, copy rotation, armature, and this is going to use the thumb. Oh, whoops. Wrong bone. This guy right here. Copy rotation. This will use the same armature, but you guessed it. It is the thumb proximal phalanx.L. And it's copying from local space to local space. Oh wait, that makes 0 sense. Reason why it doesn't quite make sense is because it's copying its rotation from itself. We're gonna experiment and see what happens if we copy from the thumb metacarpal. Because if you think about, if you look at your hand while you're grasping something, your thumb metacarpal does rotate a bit. I don't think it's nearly as much as the rest of your bones do, but just try, like opening and closing your thumb and look at that bone that's like right behind the palm of your hand. That's your metacarpal. And so let's see what this gives us. And I'm not a fan. Wait. Could have something to do with the fact that we're not rotating at its pivot. Okay. Okay. It's gonna take some work though. But in the meantime, I don't really want to spend time fixing that small the issue. So instead, we're just going to solve the problems that we do know how to solve. And we're going to add a, whoops. We're not adding an inverse kinematics constraint. That'd be a little silly. So we're going to copy from the thumb proximal phalanx rotation. And so now, if we at least rotate this, our thumb follows suit. Oh, right. For those of you who have been following along closely, we always got to set this to copy from world space to world space. Now, if we rotate this, the rest of our thumb now closes alongside. So I do believe that the solution to getting this thumb to work properly, so as you can see, it's kind of like, think about your thumb just rotating directly down towards your wrist. That ain't right. I think if we just turn this thumb bone, we should have the proper so let's say if I go to edit mode, and I'm gonna take this thumb here, I'm just gonna rotate the bones over. I'm going to go to selected, and let's rotate this bone. And it's not doing nothing. That works. Why are you not doing anything? We switch back to pose mode. We can at least give the illusion that this thing is turning the right way. Oh, it's object mode. And if we do control tab, we go into weight painting mode, which is not what we want either. We're gonna select the armature. Let me select the armature, dude. There we go. Shift tab takes us to pose mode. So if we rotate this bone a bit, we can still have it clutch over, the rest of the fingers. Please tell me this thumb's on the right side. Yes, this thumb is on the right side. So we can rotate it and it'll still work. It's still going to be a convincing clutch. You just got to be careful how we animate our thumb. Cool. So now you select all the bones, Alt-R, Alt-G, bring everything back to default. And let's finish rigging the rest of our hand now, shall we? Ooh, local space to local space. Local space to local space. And local space to local space. Alright. So now we can add one more bone constraint, and this is going to copy the rotation of the bone that came before it. So this is the index distal phalanx. The distal phalanx is going to copy from the index. Let's not copy from the proximal phalanx, but instead let's copy from the index middle phalanx. And this will copy from local space to local space. So this is the distal, middle, proximal. So the distal is going to copy the rotation of the middle. The middle is going to copy the rotation of the proximal. And so now, if we cursor to selected, rotate, we're going to get a pretty convincing. Oh. Why are you not rotating? You're local to local, right? So I guess it doesn't work because it's already constrained by a different constraint. So maybe if we copy from the proximal, yes, we do get it. I'm not sure why that's working this way. That's definitely worth looking into. But in the meantime, we're going to solve the problems that we know how to solve. And this is a solution. And I'm going to stick with this solution for now. Also, you can also bend it back in case you want to ever like, break your finger. And so the middle is also going to copy from the middle proximal phalanx.L. This is going to copy from, almost forgot, local space to local space. This is going to copy local to, local. This is going to copy from the armature ring proximal phalanx.L. This is going to copy from local space to local space, and this will copy the small proximal phalanx.L. Cursor to selected, and alright, now we're talking. And let's just test to make sure all these guys are working. Alright, look at that. Look at that sexy fist, yo. Look at that sexy fist. And if we rotate this guy in and down. Oh man. He looks ready to punch DW. Sorry, that was in bad taste. But yeah, so we have our fingers rigged. We have a working hand rig. If we're feeling extra fancy, we can add a driver and set up constraints for all of these guys. And they can all have like a simple open closed hand control. But for now, I don't think that's super necessary. I'd rather not spend the time in implementing such a thing, but it's definitely possible to do that. And so using all these controls now, I can make a punching animation. And it's going to be a heck of a lot easier to animate with these poles and with these controllers, and easy to animate. You know, instead of having to animate however many finger segments, now you just need 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And if I add that other driver, that'll take that down to 1. I'm not going to do that on this stream, but if I'm feeling up to it in the spare time, I'll do so. So we have our character's arm and our leg rigged. Last thing that we want to rig is our character's midsection. Reason why we want to rig our character's we want the midsection and the head. The head because we can set it to look at a certain thing and we'll move around while looking locked onto a certain thing. And the midsection so we can make our character twist and turn. Now I'm going to consult with the masters for a little bit. On second thought, it might actually be better to take this guy here, and we're gonna go cursor to selected, and all we're really gonna do is make sure we're looking onto it pretty tangent. We're going to rotate this guy so that he's in line with the rest of the hands, but we're also going to switch back to B-bones. Yeah, boy, my B-bones. Rotate this guy so he's lined up with the wrist, and let's scale him up a bit so he's really easy to grab. And so it doesn't matter that he's all over the place because alright. I wonder if there's any benefit in. Alright, so we're gonna take this control bone here. And this is all just real like this is all just like optimization, I guess. But it's good to optimize sometimes. Yeah, don't get stuck on bad solutions. Life is too short to get stuck on a bad solution. Yeah, it's you gotta balance the cost benefit. It's like nothing's really absolute because you're often gonna run into times where it's like, well, this is already working, and optimizing this is gonna take me a bunch of extra time, and so it's not worth it. Or it could be like, yo, this seems like it's gonna be a very big improvement, therefore I'm willing to invest that extra time in order to, ultimately make a better solution. But if you ever find yourself stuck and working on, you're not, you feel like you're optimizing more than you're actually like, let's try, was it Control Shift S? No, Control Alt S. That's it. Like if you ever feel like you're optimizing more and you're getting stuff done, you're doing something wrong. There we go. Alright, so back into pose mode. Let's turn this IK bone back on. Gonna take everything and we're going to control S to reset the scale, R to reset the rotation, G to reset the position. Alright, there we go. One thing I don't like is the way that the arm, the control bone is facing. So let's go back into cursor to selected, and we're gonna select. Oh. That's partially why I did opt further. Oh my goodness. Okay, maybe this isn't all that good of an optimization. Whatever. I don't really think I need these metacarpal bones though. Can I just remove them? Yeah, let's remove these metacarpals, except for the thumb. But the middle can go. What does she want? It's my lovely girlfriend bothering me. Oh, she wants dumplings. I could go for some dumplings too. And we're going to change the display settings. I'm going to move the display, this guy, over to my main display. Keep you prying eyes away from my business. Alright, much better. Alright, cool. So now that we removed a bunch of extra bones that we were probably never going to animate, it makes it a lot easier to see these bones, which is great. So now what we can do is just make sure this is roughly in line with the hand. And, you know, for the most part, it looks good. I can't complain about, you know, where this bone is in relation to the hand. So now I'm going to take this hand bone here. And let's make sure this is, yeah, we got hand.L. And we're going to go back into pose mode. Whoa, that's a little different. Alright, cool. So now we got hand.L selected. We're going to add a constraint. And this guy's going to copy the rotation. And he'll be copying the rotation of the IK target. So now this IK target's dual purpose. Oh my. And we're going to make that local space to local space. Perfect. So now if we move this IK target around, we're getting someplace. Oh. Rotate it. Ooh. Shift S. Selection. Or maybe we should make it, actually, this should probably be world space to world space. World space to world space. Reason being is that now as we move this guy around, the hand, it pretty much just supplants the hand. Cursor to selected. Like, now we don't even need to mess around with the hand bone, like, ever. Because the IK bone does everything the hand bone does, other than deforming, you know? So now if we go back into edit mode, we're we're going to grab all these. We're going to calculate the roll. And we're going to make it point towards the global minus y-axis. Right? Right. So now, this looks good. The hand perfectly copies our hand's location. Don't worry about that mesh deforming right now. It's probably deforming because when I deleted the metacarpal bones, these were probably strongly weighted to the metacarpals, and now that there's no bone, they probably took like the hip or something random. Or maybe even like nothing. Yeah, maybe it's just like tied to nothing. But yeah, so great. Last thing to do is we're gonna grab all these little control bones, and we need to make sure that they're no longer considered deformed bones. We do not want these guys deforming our mesh in any way, shape, or form. These guys solely exist to control other bones. They are not deforming bones. These are non-deforming bones. All right. So now we're on to something. As I was saying before, we want one more control bone for our hip. Right, right. So one way to do this is we're gonna duplicate the hip bone. Since we're in pose mode, it doesn't do anything. So we're gonna duplicate the hip. Cool. We're going to what was it called? I wish I had an audience so they could tell me. Switch direction. Alright, so we're going to switch direction of the hip because when we put the cursor here, whoa. Let's switch it to the octahedrals. So now when we rotate this guy, it's going to rotate, or it should rotate cursor to selected. Yeah. When we rotate this guy, it's going to rotate at this pivot. And this is, this is literally where your hips are. So you get that realistic hip action. Yeah. So let's remove, it's not even parented to anything, which is great. I'm going to take this guy, Alt-Shift-S, scale him up. Wait, no. Control-Alt-S, scale him up. Jeez Louise. Back to B-bone. Control-S. Yeah, make him fat. Nice and big bone. Okay, cool. And so now what we can do is we're going to make this guy this guy is now going to be yet another IK target. We need to go back to pose mode. And so he's going to have a inverse kinematics constraint armature. And he's going to be poking. He's going to be trying to follow the position and the rotation of pelvis 001, also known as IK hips or IK pelvis. Let's say IK hips. And since it's the center, we don't need the dot notation for this guy because he's not going to be mirrored. One guy to rule them all. Back to this guy, and so we want him IK hips, and so now let's test it out. Oh, look at that. Look at him go. This is great. And we're going to change the constraint of change the IK constraint to have a chain length of 1 because we just want to control the, whoa. Look at you. You are all over the place today, man. Why does for those of you Inuyasha fans, why does Tetsaiga remind somebody of a penis? It's so funny. He has like this rinky-dink sword, and then like it just turns into this giant sword, demon sword. Oh man, I could already see I'm losing subscribers, even if I didn't even have any. They're already gone now. Oh gosh. Alright, time to consult the master.
What that looks like. Middle finger out. Do it there. Good roll. Notice that. Do that the time. And so we're gonna add some finger bones. So I'm gonna bones and set up some IK and copy rotation. And IK bones.
So I want to see his secret for how he rigs his torso. He has a really cool setup here with a eerily similar character. I don't know why, but maybe it's because all male figures look pretty similar when you remove all the shading and detail and what have you. And so it looks like his setup's a little different than mine. So I'm going to go back to edit mode. I'm going to delete this guy. We're going to delete this constraint too because I'm not sure if that's giving us the intended effect. But we want this bone to be able to control where our character is, like, whether he's squatting or standing. We should be able to control that with this chest controller. So what we're going to do is make sure we're in edit mode. We're going to duplicate this bone. We're going to scale it out, make it nice and fat, extra thick.
IK bones, it's important that before you plant them down, see the...
Okay. And so now this guy needs to be not parented to anything. He is his own man. He IK IK chest. And we are going to make an IK constraint onto this bone. Back to pose mode. Inverse kinematics, armature. We're using IK chest as our target. Ooh, now we're getting somewhere. Alright, let's move the chain length to 2. See what happens with it. No, that's not what we want. Alright, so let's try a chain length of 1.
But we don't want the IK bone. In other words, we don't want that elbow bone to actually deform the neck. This deformation of these bones. If I get way far away, so you have to kind of get used to that when you're animating. I mean, you clearly can't. And then in pose mode, we're going to select select nothing, and select the outer rib side thing, and then hold shift. And I believe we want to select the spine. And press Shift I, and that component with P, and then change the IK chain 2 with the spine selected to 2. So now I can grab this kind of outer IK rib bone, and I can pose the character more easily like that. And notice that you can grab any of these IK bones and move them way far away. So you have to kind of get used to that when you're animating.
So it looks like he has an IK. He was using IK length of 2. I'm not sure if that has anything to do with this, but okay. So it looks like he has an IK. He was using IK length of 2. I'm not sure if that has to do with this. I thought I was using 2 as well, and that gives us a really weird. Like the solver's freaking out, man. But yeah. So that's the basics of rigging. We got a lot of stuff done. The arms are all set up. The chest is going to take a little bit of extra work to make sure that's working the way we expect. But yeah.